All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Those who may be new to Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, we're all about bringing science, adventure, exploration, and conservation live into classrooms across North America. School's out for the summer, but we're still going to be doing a handful of these live events over the summer months. So today we're really excited to be connecting live for a little virtual field trip to the Duke Lemur Center, founded in 1966 on the campus of Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. It is a world leader in the study, care, and protection of lemurs, Earth's most threatened group of mammals. So with more than 200 animals across 14 species, the Lemur Center houses the world's largest and most diverse population of lemurs outside of their native Madagascar. Today, we're really excited to be joined by Megan McGrath, Education Programs Manager, to learn all about one of my favorite species of lemur, the Ayeaye. So, Megan, it's so great to have you joining us live today.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be here and teach you all about not just my favorite lemur, but my favorite primate, the Ayeaye.
All right, very cool. Well, Megan, we'll let you take over. We've got a great group starting to tune in live via YouTube. We've got an awesome group of students hanging out with us from home, and we're excited to learn a little bit more about the Ayeaye.
All right, wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I figured what I would do today is try to do a version of a virtual tour. Now with our Ayeyes, I can't quite do what I did in the forest because the Ayeyes are of course nocturnal. So Ayeyes would normally be asleep at this time of day. However, our Ayeyes are actually on what we call a reverse light cycle. So when I go inside the nocturnal building, we have nice red light throughout the building all day long. And that red light doesn't hurt their eyes, but it's not very good for filming. So it wouldn't be very easy for us to do kind of a live session. So I have a presentation, but don't worry, it's mostly photos and videos. And I'll just talk to you about Ayeyes, which is something that's a bit of a running joke here. I can talk about them for hours. So hopefully I'll keep it short enough that we can get some questions. So there's a reason these guys are my favorite primate. They're incredibly unique. There's really nothing else like them in the world. But before we get into, hold on, let me make sure I can use my presentation. There we go. So before we get into talking a little bit more about what makes Ayeyes really unique, I wanted to share this really adorable photo of an Ayeaye because Ayeyes can be very strange looking. I've had people react in various ways when they meet them in person here at the Duke Lemur Center, but they're so unique and so unheard of that most people aren't sure what to expect when they see them. So this is one of our younger Ayeyes, and she's playing there. You can see her hanging off of her branch. But Ayeyes are naturally found in the eastern rainforests of Madagascar and also a little bit on the western coast in the deciduous forest. And you guys are probably familiar with deciduous forests since you live in North America. It just means the leaves fall off the trees when the seasons change. So very similar to what we have here. And then they are very, very unique in their behavioral patterns. They tend to not live in the same kind of social groups that most primates do, but also in what they like to eat. Their primary food that they like to eat is bugs and grubs. So they like finding insects and eating those, although they do eat fruits and nuts and that kind of thing as well. And they're very, very rare to find outside of Madagascar. So I think there's about 20 of them in the entirety of the United States and possibly in North America. I'm not totally sure on that stat. But if you compare that to the over 3,000 ring-tailed lemurs in zoos across North America, you can see that you're much more likely to meet a different kind of lemur than an Ayeaye, which is why most people have never seen them. So in order to understand what an Ayeaye is, I first wanted to talk about what a primate is. So there's a few characteristics that we know means that an animal is most likely going to be a primate. Now, anytime we're grouping animals together, we have to be careful not to make it a hard and fast rule. Everybody's not going to follow all the same rules in the same category, but most primates follow most of these rules. So some of these we're familiar with, right? We should be as primates ourselves. So let's see if this tracks when we talk about ourselves. So we have a long infancy. Well, humans kind of take the cake on that. We have a very, very long infancy. We stay with our parents for a long, long time. And lemurs also do that too. If you think about other types of animals, there are some types of reptiles, other animals that never even meet mom and dad. They're just born and they have to make it in the world. Whereas primates, we spend a lot of time learning how to live from mom and dad. So long infancy, long lifespan. Most primates live quite a long time. Again, humans, that's a good example. We tend to live in social groups. We do better when we live together. We do better as a group. We have relatively large brains compared to our body size. And you can see that as an example here. And then we have forward-facing eyes. Forward-facing eyes are really important for depth perception. A really good way to practice your depth perception is if you close one eye and try to catch a ball, it's a lot harder than when you have both eyes open. So that's an experiment you guys can do at home with your family, is try playing catch back and forth and then close one eye and see if it's as easy when you start playing catch again. That two-eye perspective, both facing forward, is really important for that. And then we have grasping hands and fingernails. Now, the difference between fingernails and claws is that fingernails don't go over the edge of our fingertips. So if you think about a dog's paw, they have claws that kind of come over the edge of the tip of their toe. And the claw is what's going to hit the ground. You see it in their paw prints. Whereas with primates, we use our hands a lot. We use them for grabbing onto things and manipulating small things, picking up pencils. When we're cooking, we use them a lot. So we don't need long claws getting in the way of that. So those are some of the main characteristics you see in primates. And we do see a lot of those. By the way, this is Hamadryas baboons that we have a picture of here. So this is a troop of a very recognizable type of primate. So let's talk about what characteristics Ayeyes have. So we do have a lot of the primate characteristics. So this is another happy young Ayeaye. You can see here, all the photos you're seeing today are Ayeyes that live or have lived here at the Duke Lemur Center. So we can see they do have a long infancy and lifespan. They spend a lot of time with mom and dad, and Ayeyes in the wild can live into their teens, maybe even early 20s. We're not totally sure because they're not easy to find in the wild. But here they can actually live into their mid to late 30s. So they can live quite a long time. They definitely have large brains compared to their body. Ayeyes are particularly well known for that in the lemur family. Other lemurs don't have as big of brains. They're not known for being the smartest of the primates, but Ayeyes are definitely the smartest of the lemurs. They definitely have forward-facing eyes, and they have grasping hands. But there's also a few things that make them a little bit weird. First, they're solitary. They don't like living with anybody else. They like mostly living alone. They will come together for breeding purposes, for mating purposes, and they will rear their young. But after that, they mostly live by themselves. They also have these really strange teeth. So I labeled them as beaver teeth, but basically they're incisors just like a rodent. So you can see actually an example right here. You can see these two teeth, and we'll be focusing on those a little bit later too and talking more about those. They also have claws instead of fingernails. So you can see they've got these long claws that kind of go past the end of their fingertips. And we're definitely going to talk about their tapping finger, because that is a super unique feature. So that's this skinny little finger that's right here, kind of jutting down from the rest of their fingers. So even though they share a lot of the characteristics that primates have, they also have some weird ones that nobody was expecting. And in fact, some of the early explorers and scientists who found them actually didn't know what to do with Ayeyes when they first found them. And some of them classified them as rodents. They thought, I don't know, it's just some kind of giant rat. And they kind of left it at that. But now we know better. Now we know they're definitely primates. Now, one thing I wanted to do with this presentation was just shamelessly show you guys cute photos and videos of Ayeyes. So this is an example of Ayeaye nests. So Ayeyes are solitary and they're nocturnal. So they like to be alone and they like to sleep during the day. So that means they need to find somewhere nice and quiet where the sunlight's not going to bother them. So in the wild, they'll build these big elaborate nests out of tree branches and leaves. But here we give them different materials. So you can see we have this box. We actually give them usually a big giant paper bag, and then they'll pull in lots of different materials to make their own little nest to sleep in. And this Ayeaye wove this nest themselves. They'll spend hours sometimes putting the nest together, and then they'll go ahead and pull all of the materials out of the nest, redo it if they don't like it. You can see here that they'll incorporate blankets and fleece and things like that. So they really, really enjoy their nest, and it's a big part of an Ayeaye being comfortable in their living space, so they have somewhere quiet to go. And most of these photos, you're going to see Ayeyes by themselves. But when you do see two Ayeyes together, it's going to be a mom and her offspring. So they do stay together for a few years. So that's why you're seeing mom and daughter right here sharing the nest. Now, next, we're going to focus on some of those physical adaptations, because those are the most unique thing about Ayeyes, in my opinion. So here we have a really good example of these teeth. You can see them really well with this kind of cheesy smile that we have going on. And then we have this really interesting long nose. We've got forward-facing eyes, big old brain for their body, and these giant ears. Ayeyes actually have the biggest ears compared to their body of any primate. And they use those ears along with that big brain, those eyes, especially that nose and those teeth, to hunt down insects hiding inside of trees. So all lemurs are known for having what's called a rhinarium. So that's an elongated nose that's wet. Think of a dog. They have a long nose, it's wet, and they have a much better sense of smell than we do. So all lemurs are going to have that long, wet nose. It helps them smell. But Ayeyes have very, very unique features in addition to that. So to get a better view of that, I actually have some scans of an Ayeye skull that I can show you. But first, let's watch a little video. And I know this might be a little hard to see with our slideshows. So all the videos are also on the Duke Lemur Center's Facebook page if you guys want to go take a dive and learn more about nocturnal animals. So let's see if we can get this going. No, oop, wrong play button. Okay, that one isn't working for me, but I have a secret weapon I can do. Let's see if I can play it on our page instead. All right, is my screen share still working?
Yep, still sharing.
Great. So here we've got a nice video of an Ayeaye using those incisors, those two front teeth, and she's eating a nice ear of corn. You can see she's grasping and holding onto it with her hand. This is Endora. She's actually one of our oldest residents. She's about 37 years old. So you can see those kind of adaptations at work. All right, let me move on back to the presentation. Switch back and forth. There. All right, so now let's look at that Ayeaye skull. So these are scans of real Ayeaye skulls, but no animals were harmed in the making of these scans. So this is from our division of fossil primates. So they study the bones of living and extinct lemurs so we can learn more about them. And this is a really, really great way to talk about what it means to be a primate. Now, I mentioned already, Ayeyes break a lot of rules. We thought they might be rodents a long time ago, hundreds of years ago. One of our biggest clues that these guys are not just primates, but definitely lemurs is this right here. So if you look at the eye socket, this is the part of the skull where your eyes go. And in an Ayeaye and any other lemur, you have what's called a post-orbital bar. That is this bone that goes all the way around the eye socket. But if you were to look at my skull or Joe's skull, you would see bone back here behind our eye, kind of closing our whole eye orbit in. But when you're looking at a lemur, you just see this bar here and then it's open behind. That's a very, very easy way to tell. If you're looking at a skull and you see only this bone looping around the eye, but nothing back behind, you're going to be looking at a lemur skull most likely. And then also we can see some other neat things. We can see this nice open space down this long nose for lots of soft tissue structures to give them a really, really good sense of smell so they can absorb all those chemicals and recognize them. And then you see these giant teeth. And these giant teeth are one of the most amazing things about them. So let's get a side view here. So you can see that bar, nothing behind, giant space for the brain, and then these really weird teeth. And they're actually even weirder than they look once we look kind of at their place inside the skull. Here is a regular ewe lemur skull. So a ewe lemur is a type of lemur like a mongoose lemur or a blue-eyed black lemur. So it's just a group of lemurs. There's a lot of them. And so you can see we've got this long nose, we've got the post-orbital bar. The brain case isn't quite as big, but still pretty big. And then these teeth don't look anything like the Ayeaye. They go all the way forward. So the Ayeaye is really unique even for a lemur. And now let's talk even more about those incisors. This is actually how far back in their head the Ayeye's incisors go. So this red down here on the bottom, that's their bottom tooth. So if you remember, boop, this is how much of the tooth you can see coming out of their skull when they're biting and chewing and using those teeth. This is how much of their tooth is actually in their head. So that means that their tooth goes all the way back underneath their nose, and this is where the eyeball is. So their tooth comes all the way back underneath their eye inside of their skull. That's how long that tooth is. And this bottom tooth is even longer, wrapping all the way around and starting all the way back here. And those teeth are what we call open root incisors, meaning that they just continuously grow throughout the Ayeye's life. So the same thing happens with rodents. Squirrels, their teeth will continue to grow. Rats, their teeth will continue to grow. This is not something you usually see in primates, though. And the reason it's okay that those teeth continue to grow is that Ayeayes use them all the time to chew through really tough, hard things, like mostly bark on the outside of wood, but they also can use them to break into nuts and that kind of thing. So those teeth will wear down over time because they're chewing really, really hard stuff with it because they've got really, really strong jaws. In fact, if you were to give an Ayeaye enough time and enough time for their teeth to keep growing in, they can actually nibble through concrete over time. That's how strong those jaws are and how strong those teeth are. So it's very, very important for Ayeayes to have those really, really strong teeth because that's what helps them break into that hard wood in Madagascar to get all the bugs that are hiding inside. So I just really love this image because it's just a little mind-blowing just how long those teeth are there. So here's a photo of one of our Ayeayes doing exactly what Ayeayes do best. So you can see chewing right into that bark, and you can see there's little frayed bits of wood coming off the side. They can break through wood in record time. It only takes a few seconds for them to bite right in and get access to the softer wood underneath. And this is actually something we call a bamboo feeder. So this is an Ayeaye holding tight with those grasping hands and then using those incisors to break right into bamboo. And bamboo is something that's used as a hardwood floor. So that gives you an idea of just how hard this material is. And Ayeayes can crack it open in a few seconds. And what we'll do is we'll take these cuts of bamboo, we'll fill them with mealworms, which is a favorite snack. And then we will make sure we seal all the openings, and the Ayeaye has to chew through the wood in order to get in to get after their food. So we can kind of encourage what they do in the wild. Another thing we do is we bring them soft rotten logs from outside too. So it's kind of an easy snack for them and they can eat the bugs from outside on the grounds here too. But once they get the wood chewed open, that's when the even more unique adaptation comes in. That's when this tapping finger comes in. So the tapping finger is the middle finger on the front hand. So both front hands, left and right, Ayeayes have a tapping finger. And from what we've seen, they seem to use both kind of interchangeably. We haven't done an exact study on this, but our researchers and our staff have kind of noticed they can use both their left and their right, kind of ambidextrous. And so they use that tapping finger once they get inside the wood to search and find the grub, and that claw hooks into the grub, pulls it out, and they can eat it. But the tapping finger is very, very specially adapted. There's actually only one other animal in the world that has a finger like this, and it's totally unrelated to Ayeayes. There's a type of squirrel in Asia that has a finger like this, and we think it was something called, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the term. I'll remember the term in a moment, but basically there's a term for when two animals develop the same adaptation, but totally separate. They're not related to each other. I'll remember it in a minute. Okay, so, or you can look it up. So basically, we don't think that this Ayeaye is related to squirrels. We think they both just happen to evolve this super, super unique trait to sneak things out of trees. So here we're going to see one of my favorite videos. This is baby Ayeaye, Melisandre, and she's less than a year old in this video, and she is learning how to explore the world, and she uses her tapping finger to explore the world. So they tap and listen to everything around them to see what's going on. And so you're going to see a really cute example of that once I switch, since my video isn't cooperating. And let's go back. Here she is. So you can see that she's kind of looking around curiously. She's got her ears kind of flopping, but then she starts using her fingers. She starts tapping on the wood. She's hanging on. You can see it really well right there. So that's her tapping fingers, flapping, flapping, flapping. And you'll notice she doesn't look super coordinated because she's only a few months old. So moving is hard, using your tapping finger is hard. And so she doesn't quite have all of that down yet. And so that's kind of an example of when they're first learning to use that tapping finger. Now let's go back. And I actually have a scan of the tapping finger that we can see as well. So here is a scan of what an Ayeye's hand looks like. And to give you an idea of what we're looking at, right here, just behind where the blue arrows are, this is what would be the bones in our hand. So it looks like the fingers start here, but that's just because we don't see where the hand is. So this is where the hand is. And then after that is where the fingers really start. And the reason I have some arrows on here is that the tapping finger is not just much skinnier than all of the other fingers. At this joint right here, right where the finger is coming off of the hand, you can also see it looks a little bit different. So I have these arrows here pointing out structures called sesamoid bones. And sesamoid bones are basically there to help keep the tendon that runs down your finger. So that's the thing that kind of runs down the middle of your finger, bit of flesh that helps it bend up and down. So this is what makes sure that when your finger is bending, it's bending up and down. So think of it kind of like these bones help keep that tendon on the right track, so that when your finger moves, it moves up and down and things don't go off course. Well, this finger here, this middle finger, doesn't have those bones blocking the tendon from moving in different directions. So that means that this middle finger on an Ayeaye can bend any direction. So it can bend backwards, sideways, either direction. And so we would hurt ourselves if we tried to bend our finger all the way to the right or all the way to the left. Our fingers do best when they're bending up and down. But an Ayeye's finger is so flexible, it can easily bend all those different directions. And here is another view to kind of give you a good view of it. So you can see these bones sit right underneath that joint, and they're just spaced apart enough so that the tendon is kind of controlled in which way it can go. But again, no sesamoid bones here. So nothing controlling the range of motion that the Ayeaye has on that skinny middle finger. That middle finger is also, I find it really fascinating that researchers discovered that that finger actually heats up a few degrees every time that the Ayeaye is actively using it. And that's because that little finger is so skinny that it mainly is just bone and blood vessel and tendon and a little bit of muscle. But basically, it's very, very hard to keep that finger heated up, because the heat basically evaporates right out of the finger as they're using it, because it's so skinny, there's not much to insulate and hold all that heat in. So that means using that finger is what we call energetically expensive, meaning it uses a lot of energy to use that finger. So when the Ayeaye is moving around and not using that finger, they'll actually, another cute Ayeaye photo. So you can see she uses it as pretty much every utensil that you can imagine. So when she's using it, she has her other fingers pulled back and she has that finger extended all the way out. This is what I think gives people the wrong impression that that middle finger is super long compared to their other fingers. But actually, you can see right here that it's not their longest finger, but it always looks like it is because of how they use it. When they use it, they scrunch all their other fingers back and they just extend this one finger, and they use it to drink water. They use it to eat all of their food. They really use it all of the time. Here's another example. So this is just a little piece of banana, not anything that's really hard to eat. They could just pop it right in their mouth, but she thinks that it's more fun, and it's how she's evolved, to use that middle finger to scoop out all of the insides of the banana. So she's using that middle finger and that claw to scoop out all the soft insides so she can get it into her mouth. And you can see that finger looks so crazy long compared to her other fingers, but it's just because of how she's holding the rest of her hand. That finger's doing all the work on that hand, so the other fingers just curl back to stay out of the way. This is one of my favorite videos ever, so I'm really excited to share it with you all. And this is an example of Ayeyes eating eggs. So we give soft-boiled eggs to our Ayeyes here, and they love eating the yolk. It's a really important source of protein. And this is a great video we got of Ardry and Elphaba, who's a mom and daughter, and they were kind enough to come out when their lights were still on. So think of this like a super early time for an Ayeaye to be awake. You can see we're tapping to investigate the egg at first, and then what she's going to do is choose a little hole right in the top of that egg. Now remember, the teeth are so strong they could nibble through the wood she's standing on, but it's very delicate. And just choose a tiny hole in the egg, and now you can see she's using that middle finger as a spoon. She uses it to scoop all the yolk out of the inside of the egg. And so it almost looks like she's holding a utensil, like when we eat with a spoon or a fork, just her finger. I should say that video was courtesy of her primary caretaker. So you can see she clearly trusted whoever was getting that video and didn't mind her being very close with the camera. So that was one of my favorite things we've ever gotten on video. So it's a great example of them using that tapping finger. And this is just one of my favorite stories here. So this is an older Ayeaye, and she was gifted a pineapple. Now this was a very special pineapple because we grew it here in our garden, and we'd had a lot of trouble in the past because raccoons kept stealing our pineapples before we could harvest them. So this one we managed to save, but it was one little pineapple, and it's very hard to split that up amongst over 200 lemurs. So we decided to gift this whole pineapple to one of our older Ayeyes, our senior Ayeyes, but she'd never seen a whole pineapple as far as we knew. So we decided to put some honey on the leaves here just to tell her, hey, this is something to eat. You should be excited about this. And they gave her the pineapple. She seemed to only really lick the top leaves, and they said, okay, we'll leave it in overnight and see if she figures it out. And they came in the next morning and they were pretty disappointed because they found the pineapple just sitting on the ground, looked like it hadn't even been touched after she licked that honey off of the top. And they said, oh, well, we tried. And then they went to pick up the pineapple, and they noticed that it was much lighter than it had been the day before. And that's when they rolled it over, and they saw that she had, in fact, eaten the pineapple. She had just done what Ayeyes do best. She had taken a little section out with her strong beaver-like teeth, and then she used her tapping finger to scoop all of those tasty insides out of the pineapple. So it just goes to show they eat a little bit differently than we would expect. Unfortunately for Ayeyes, despite being amazing and having all these crazy adaptations, they also have a reputation for being a bit spooky. You can see why, definitely in this photo. Now imagine that you're in Madagascar and you are moving through the forest late at night, and all of a sudden, way up in a tree, you see this little ghost-like face peering down at you. No other animals in sight, just this guy, because they live alone. And then if you manage to see those hands with those long fingers and the claws, those giant bat-like ears, these guys definitely have some characteristics of animals that we consider kind of creepy in our own history. So in Madagascar, Ayeyes unfortunately have the added threat, in addition to deforestation, of being an animal that is not very well liked, and in some of the Malagasy traditional cultures is actually viewed as an evil omen. So think of it kind of how a lot of people view black cats in the United States today. It still can be a bit of a superstition for people. And how the public views animals can have a really strong impact on how conservation goes for those animals. One of the examples I think of is wolves in the kind of middle to northern United States. Wolves have a long history of having a bit of conflict with ranchers out in that part of the United States. And so conservation efforts for large carnivores like wolves and bears, even to this day, struggle quite a bit because some people don't like those animals as much because they threaten their livelihood, they view them as scary. And so some lemurs, like the Ayeaye, can actually have that added pressure. I do want to add, though, that the fadi, which is a Malagasy word for taboo, the fadi against Ayeyes that makes them viewed as an evil omen is actually something that can be reversed for other lemurs. So the largest lemur is called the Indri, and there is a fadi for the Indri, but that fadi is against harming the Indri because it's considered sacred and really important to the people of Madagascar. So it really depends on the animal, how it might be viewed, just like it does here in North America. So one of the things that we do here at the Duke Lemur Center, in addition to working on environmental education in Madagascar and helping empower Malagasy educators to teach more about the environment around them, hosting workshops and helping to fund field trips for students to get out into the forest and see the animals around them. The other thing we do here is we have a breeding program. Again, just a shameless reason to show you an adorable baby Ayeaye photo. But this is a very, very young Ayeaye. I would guess within the first week or so. So you can see very tiny, about the size of a human hand, tiny, tiny little hands. But this is an Ayeaye that was born here at the Duke Lemur Center. And again, they're very, very rare to find in North America. So this is a really, really important thing. And what these baby Ayeyes do here is they form what we call a genetic safety net. So the conservation breeding we do here helps make sure that no matter what's happening in the wild in Madagascar, we know we do have a healthy line of Ayeyes that are still living with us here. And that way we can work on the problems they're facing in Madagascar without worrying about them just going extinct out in the wild. So we have to work on both problems at once, since Ayeyes are an endangered species. I also just love how you can see that grasping hand really well and this giant thumb down here. So you can see that the thumb is at a completely different angle. And you can see the thumb looks very different than our thumb. So their thumbs are what's called semi-opposable. So that thumb is really, you can see, adapted for reaching and grasping around a branch or around a piece of fruit, whereas our fully opposable thumbs can reach and touch each finger individually. So we can touch each of our fingers to our thumb. We can pick up tiny things between our fingers. That's something you see in lots of monkeys. You see it in apes. You see it in humans. But lemurs, they're an earlier evolution of primates, so they just have those semi-opposable or grasping thumbs, which are perfect for what they need them for, but that's why they use other things other than their hands to groom, like their tooth comb. But Ayeyes don't have a tooth comb, so they'll actually use their claws more for grooming themselves. And they'll even use that tapping finger for grooming, actually. All right, so I just wanted to close with more on baby Ayeyes, and it looks like this video isn't going to work for me. Let me find a substitute for you all. Okay, this is one of my favorite videos ever. I think this will be a good one. So this is one of our young Ayeyes, Agatha. And she's a couple of years old in this photo. She's turning 3 this year. And this is her mom up here. Mom's not really paying much attention to her. Medusa's just staying out of her way. She's working on her nest. And Agatha, unbeknownst to Medusa, is in an epic battle against a paper bag. That's all it is. It's just a giant paper bag, like one of those yard waste bags you'll get to put a lot of stuff in. So this is a great example of how playful young primates can be, and how simple the enrichment we give them can be. This isn't sped up, by the way. This is the actual speed with which she was attacking this bag. And as she's bouncing around, you can see this piece of bamboo here is moving as she's banging against it. That's actually on purpose. When you're an Ayeaye climbing through the trees in Madagascar, the trees don't stay perfectly still. Branches move and they sway. You can see that she keeps jutting up against this log down here. So that log is actually an old dead log we brought in. So that's a great example of the different enrichments that we do to try to keep the Ayeyes active and keep them moving around. And sometimes that means battling a paper bag. So that's my overview of Ayeyes and some of the really unique things about them. There's lots more I could talk about with Ayeyes, so I tried to focus myself and give you kind of a quick overview. So I'm hoping you guys might have some questions for me about them.
All right. Well, Megan, thank you so much for that great presentation. I mean, look at them. They're so cool. I love seeing them in action. There's some great BBC footage of them kind of moving through the trees and tapping with the finger. They're so cool. So thanks for sharing this amazing lemur species with us today. All right. Well, let's get to some questions. I can see already at the Campbells, I see someone's hand up. So why don't you go ahead and unmute and we'll get your question.
Do Ayeyes use their tails like lemurs do for keeping balance?
Absolutely, that was a great question. Not only do they use their tails for keeping balance, but Ayeyes have some of my favorite tails in all of the lemur group. So let me see if I can find you a really good tail shot. I think I have one at the beginning, all the way back through. But Ayeyes have these crazy long tails. There we go. So you can see that tail is really long and really bushy. What's funny about this tail is if you were to shave this tail, it would just be a skinny little rod. So it's mostly fur. But yes, they absolutely use it to help them balance. And Ayeyes can climb up trees. They climb on branches upside down. They'll hang upside down. So that tail's really helpful as a counterbalance. Good thought.
All right, that's a great question from Ontario here in Canada. We're going to go visit Kennedy now. Kennedy is joining us. Where's Kennedy? Gibsonville, North Carolina. Kennedy, if you want to turn your mic on, go ahead if you have a question.
So are Ayeayes friendly?
So that's an interesting question. And as usual, I have a longer answer than you're probably expecting. So friendly is something interesting when we talk about wild animals, because friendly for Ayeayes isn't the same as it would be for, say, a dog or a cat. Now, Ayeyes are very good with our animal care staff and people being around them. They're definitely not aggressive, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they are friendly, which is actually a good thing because we don't want wild animals to be super friendly towards people. They're very friendly towards their mates. They're very, very friendly towards the babies that they're raising. But for us, they mostly say, okay, you have good food and you seem trustworthy, so I'll work with you. And that's really the relationship that we want with those Ayeyes. One really great example of what we can do with the Ayeyes, as long as they think of us as, you know, the folks who bring them food and are very trustworthy, is we can do what's called touch training. So we've actually done some training with one of our female Ayeyes in the past where she actually hung upside down on her branch, just like she would do when she's foraging for food. And on cue, she would do that for usually a peanut. That's a really good reward for them, or a mealworm. And then they were able to work their way up through that trusting training to shaving her belly and using applesauce to do an ultrasound on her belly to make sure that everything was going okay for her baby so that they could do that imaging. And any moms out there who ever had an ultrasound know they usually use that gel, but we knew that she would probably lick the gel off afterwards. So we used applesauce as a substitute because we knew that would be safe for her to eat. So I wouldn't say that they're friendly like a dog or a cat, but Ayeyes are definitely not aggressive towards people, and they're very easy to work with overall, which is really good when they have those really strong, scary teeth.
All right, very cool. Great question. Just want to shout out to YouTube. We've got a great group tuning in live via YouTube, so don't be afraid to send us in some questions. Megan, I'll get you if you want to hit stop screen share so you come back nice and full screen for us for the questions.
Sure.
Perfect. So Genevieve and Juliet are joining us. I believe they're joining us in Oshawa, Ontario. If you want to go ahead and unmute, we'd love to grab a question.
I do have a question. What are Ayeye's natural predators?
So the main natural predator for any lemur living in Madagascar is usually the fossa, which is a carnivore native to Madagascar. And I thought last night I should bring up a picture of a fossa to have it ready for this presentation, and I didn't. So it's spelled Fossa. They're a super unique carnivore. In fact, I'm wondering if maybe we should do a fossa presentation soon. And their whole family is only found on Madagascar, just like lemurs, but their closest relative outside of Madagascar would be animals in the mongoose family. So they're about the size of, I'd say, a bobcat. That's a familiar North America reference. And they kind of a rusty brown color, and they climb trees very well. So they're a very, very good predator. I don't know of any other specific threats to Ayeyes. Unfortunately, the main predator for an Ayeaye nowadays in Madagascar might actually be people because of that body against them.
All right. Good question. So just, you mentioned potentially doing a presentation on the fossa. Just to kind of remind everybody, we're going to continue the events through the summer. So Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, you can check out new events from the Duke Lemur Center. So next Thursday, we'll have something cooked up. Right, Megan?
Absolutely. We're actually doing a really exciting series starting next Thursday where we're going to do 4 parts with are staff researchers, and they're going to talk to you all about lemur science that they do here and in Madagascar. So definitely something to tune in for.
All right, very cool. So let's grab a question off of YouTube. Francis is wondering, is there any place outside of Madagascar where you could find a lemur? You know, not in a zoo, but more in the wild.
So not for Ayeyes in particular, they're only found on the island of Madagascar. But in terms of other lemurs, they have been introduced and naturalized on the Comoros Islands, which are the islands that are just off the northern tip of Madagascar if you're heading back towards mainland Africa. There's a few little islands there. And I know mongoose lemurs are one of the lemurs found there. I believe there might be a species of dwarf lemur or a smaller lemur as well. But we think those were introduced later on. They did not evolve on that island. So naturally and endemically, meaning where they were found and evolved from, you would find them just on Madagascar.
All right. We've got to head to another part of Canada here. We're going to go to Calgary, where we've got the Biffords hanging out with us. If you want to go ahead and turn your mic on, we'd love to steal a question if you have one.
Don't have a
All right. Looks good. How you guys doing?
We don't have a question today.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries. I did see that Genevieve and Juliet had their hand up again, and Nadine, or the Campbells do too. So let's start off with Genevieve and Juliet, and then we'll go back to the Campbells.
Why is it harder to find Ayeyes than other lemurs?
That's a great question. So mainly it's due to their behaviors and their habits. So if you think about it, if you're looking for something like a ring-tailed lemur that can live in a troop of up to 30 individuals down in the spiny desert, well, you're going to be looking for one of 30 to find a troop of ring-tailed lemurs. So that logistically just makes it easier to find 30 animals versus one. So Ayeyes being solitary is a big part of it. They also can have really large ranges in the wild. So they can have like a 2 kilometer, I'm going to not say the number because I'm not sure of it, but it's a very, very large range that they can have individually. They don't overlap much, and they're nocturnal. They live really high up in the canopy layers of the trees, usually in that rainforest where it's really, really dense. They're out mainly at night. So I have heard many stories from researchers, people who are doing kind of eco vacations to Madagascar, that they really wanted to see Ayeyes. They saw lots of other lemurs, but people have done multiple trips to Madagascar and never seen an Ayeaye in the wild. They're very, very hard to find. Usually your best bet is to work with a local Malagasy guide who really knows their forest, knows it well, and might know where a particular Ayeaye sleeps in a tree. It'd be extremely rare to just come across one in the wild. You usually have to find somebody who knows where they live, knows where they nest, and then they can take you over there.
All right, very cool. Campbells, go ahead and turn your microphone on.
How much do Ayeyes weigh?
Ooh, that's a very, very good question. And I'm going to cheat a little bit and tell you how much one of the Ayeyes that we talked about today weighs, because I'm on my computer, so I might as well. So give me just a moment to look that up. So while I'm looking that up, I'll explain where I'm going. So we have records here for all of our Ayeyes for their entire lifetime of how much they've weighed. And that's really, really important because it tells us if they're feeling okay. Ayeyes and any other lemur, one of the biggest ways we can tell if they're feeling okay is if their weight is fluctuating. Have they lost a lot of weight recently? Have they gained a lot of weight recently? And so we weigh all of our lemurs at least once every 2 months. Let me see if I've stalled for time enough. Oh, my computer's not connecting to our database. I want to give you an estimate, but I'm always wary of getting it very, very wrong. If I were to do it in pounds, they weigh a lot less than you'd be expecting. So usually they weigh like 5 to 6 pounds-ish. They're actually very, very light. Most of what you see on their body is just lots of bristly fur. They're actually pretty skinny underneath there. They don't have much weight on them. Sorry that my system wasn't working to give you an exact answer.
All right, no worries. I want to go, we've got Lynn joining us in Raleigh, North Carolina. And she's wondering about something that we could do from so far away to help support and protect the lemurs?
Absolutely. So this can be a big question. So one of the things you can do is you can find organizations like us, the Duke Lemur Center, or maybe another zoo or zoological conservation association near you, and you can learn about what they're doing to protect the lemurs. And if you like what they're doing, you can support those programs. Working on conservation in places so far away and so culturally different is a really, really big project. And so we at the Duke Lemur Center have been working in Madagascar for almost 30 years, getting to know the Malagasy people, earning their trust so that they know that we want to work with them to help find solutions to the problems they're facing. So it's definitely not an easy switch and you can fix something. So I recommend supporting places like the Duke Lemur Center. Of course, we'd love your support. And if you want to learn more about what we do in Madagascar, you're welcome to check that out on our website. We've got lots of great information about our programs.
All right, very cool. Well, Megan, I want to start off with a huge, oh, actually, let's squeeze one more, and I see Kennedy has a hand up. Go ahead, Kennedy.
So do Ayeyes get along with any other like species?
Yeah, they definitely get along.
Megan, can you unmute for us? I think your mute accidentally came on.
Yeah, it did. That was odd. Am I good now?
Yep, we got you now.
So Ayeyes here will live with other species, but we don't usually see them interacting much. It's more that they get along in the sense that I'll live in this area, we'll occasionally steal each other's food, but we don't really get mad at each other about it, which is as much as we can ask for, really. So we've had Ayeyes successfully live with smaller lemur species, with fat-tailed dwarf lemurs in particular, which are a species that's going to be highlighted in our research series, in the next series we do. We've also seen them get along with another species of really early primate called a loris. So we've seen them get along with slow lorises and pygmy slow lorises. We've seen them get along with bush babies. In fact, Andorra, our oldest Ayeaye here, actually lives with two little bush babies and gets along just fine with them. In the wild, I don't think you're going to see much interaction between them. I think the only time we really see animals interact in the wild is when they're both going for the same resource, the same nut, the same piece of food. So I think Ayeyes mostly keep to themselves, but they're pretty good neighbors here.
All right. Well, a huge shout out to YouTube today. We had a great group tuning in for one of our first summer sessions, so that's great. Huge shout out to the groups who joined us live on camera. And then Megan, thank you for another awesome presentation. No denying your passion for the Ayeaye shines through, and they deserve it. You're shedding a spotlight on a really cool species. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today. And we're really excited for next week's trip to the Duke Lemur Center.
You're very, very welcome. And I hope I converted a few people to consider the Ayeaye for favorite primate.
All right, very cool. Well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Looking forward to seeing you all in a future event. So thanks, everyone.